In the midst of the brutal Iran-Iraq War, Iraq found itself on the brink of collapse, financially drained and desperate for support. It was Kuwait, a neighboring country with vast oil wealth, that stepped in, providing billions of dollars to help Iraq's war effort. But this act of solidarity would soon turn into a nightmare. Just a few years later, Saddam Hussein, instead of showing gratitude, set his sights on Kuwait. The tiny nation became the target of one of the swiftest and most shocking invasions in modern history. With over 100,000 troops, Iraq launched a full-scale attack, conquering Kuwait in just 2 days. How did it come to this? Let's unravel the events that led to this astonishing turn of fate. To understand the Iraq-Kuwait invasion, we need to first dive into the Iran-Iraq War, a grueling 8-year conflict that raged from 1980 to 1988. Iraq, led by Saddam Hussein, had ambitions to dominate the Persian Gulf and saw an opportunity to weaken Iran during its internal chaos following the 1979 Islamic Revolution. However, the war quickly spiraled into a stalemate, draining Iraq's resources and leaving the nation on the verge of bankruptcy. Kuwait, a small but wealthy oil-producing nation, was among the Arab countries that lent their support to Iraq during this difficult time. Kuwait provided Iraq with billions of dollars in loans, believing that a strong Iraq would serve as a buffer against the rise of Iranian influence in the region. But as the war dragged on and Iraq's debt to Kuwait mounted, this relationship would soon become strained. After the war with Iran ended in 1988, Iraq faced a severe economic crisis. The country owed massive debts to Kuwait, totaling around $14 billion. Saddam Hussein began pressuring Kuwait to forgive the debt, claiming that Iraq had fought on behalf of the entire Arab world to stop the spread of Iran's Islamic Revolution. But Kuwait, struggling with its own financial concerns, refused. Tensions escalated further when Iraq accused Kuwait of overproducing oil, which drove down global prices and severely harmed Iraq's already fragile economy. Iraq claimed that Kuwait was deliberately undermining its recovery efforts, while also accusing Kuwait of stealing oil from the Rumaila oil field, a disputed area along the Iraq-Kuwait border. Diplomatic negotiations between the two nations failed. Saddam Hussein grew increasingly frustrated, feeling that Kuwait was disrespecting Iraq's sacrifices during the war. With Iraq's economy teetering on collapse, Saddam saw a quick solution to his problems: seizing Kuwait's vast oil reserves. By July 1990, tensions had reached a boiling point. Despite last-ditch efforts by the Arab League and other international actors to mediate, Saddam Hussein made the decision to take Kuwait by force. On July 31, 1990, during a high-level meeting with his inner circle, Saddam issued the final order for invasion. Iraq's military leaders were instructed to prepare for a large-scale, rapid assault on Kuwait, with the aim of seizing control of the country before the international community could react. In the early hours of August 2, 1990, Iraqi forces crossed into Kuwait. Over 100,000 Iraqi troops, backed by 700 tanks, swept through the border in a carefully coordinated blitzkrieg-style attack. In support of these units, the Iraqi army deployed a squadron of MiL-Me-25 helicopter gunships, several units of MiL-Me-8 and MiL-Me-17 transport helicopters, as well as a squadron of Bell 412 helicopters. The foremost mission of the helicopter units was to transport and support Iraqi commandos into Kuwait City and subsequently to support the advance of ground troops. The Iraqi Air Force, IQAF, had at least 2 squadrons of Sukhoi Su-22, one of Su-25, one of Mirage F-1, and 2 of MiG-23 fighter bombers. The main task of the IQAF was to establish air superiority through limited airstrikes against 2 main air bases of the Kuwaiti Air Force, whose aircraft consisted mainly of Mirage F-1S and Douglas T-A4KU Skyhawks. Within hours, the Iraqi military had overwhelmed Kuwaiti defenses, capturing key installations, oil fields, and the capital city of Kuwait City. The Kuwaiti military, outnumbered and outgunned, offered little resistance. Iraq's elite Republican Guard stormed the emir's palace, forcing the Kuwaiti royal family to flee the country. By August 4th, just 2 days after the invasion began, Iraq had effectively taken control of Kuwait. The operation had been swift and brutal. Kuwaiti civilians woke up to the horrifying reality of occupation as Iraqi troops looted, detained, and even executed those who resisted. Saddam Hussein declared that Kuwait was now Iraq's 19th province and installed a puppet regime. The world was stunned by the rapid fall of Kuwait. Almost Almost immediately, the international community condemned Iraq's invasion. The United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 660, demanding Iraq's immediate withdrawal from Kuwait. The U.S. and its allies, including the UK, France, and Saudi Arabia, called for collective action, and economic sanctions were quickly imposed on Iraq. President George H.W. Bush declared the invasion as unacceptable, famously stating that this aggression will not stand. Behind the scenes, diplomatic efforts intensified to isolate Iraq and pressure Saddam to reverse his course. The U.S. began mobilizing troops, preparing for what would eventually become Operation Desert Storm, the military campaign to liberate Kuwait. Meanwhile, the Arab world was divided. Some nations, like Jordan and Yemen, sympathized with Iraq's grievances, while others, like Saudi Arabia and Egypt, feared Saddam's growing power. Saddam's attempt to position the invasion as a stand against Western imperialism failed to gain widespread support. The invasion of Kuwait would mark the beginning of Iraq's isolation from the international community and set the stage for the Gulf War, a conflict that would not only reshape the Middle East but also the world's geopolitical landscape. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into historical events and conflicts that shaped our world.